Matt, welcome to the show. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm waiting for you to nail the name.
Well, Matt Wampler. I got Matt Wampler down. That's Matt. That was an easy one. And when we got in our pre-show audience, you're going to love this. We went into some stuff that is going to blow your mind. You know, where his back, our paths have crossed over some different concepts, and he's one of the guys who originated one of the really great brands out there. Worked with Jimmy John's and really growing that brand, and some of the technology learned in developing that brand, he's really brought in the restaurants across the world. And we're going to get into how to make your best your restaurant smarter, and excited about having you on the show, Matt.
I'm super excited to be here.
You know, early days of Jimmy John's were was a lot of fun. I know your old man was a big part of growing the brand, and those were some real chaotic days.
Yeah, they were for sure. Talk about some guys just trying to figure it out, the school of hard knocks. But the great thing about it is when you get a bunch of operators together that are figuring out exactly what the right systems and procedures are firsthand, they put together a great playbook for franchisees, and I got to be the beneficiary.
One thing that Jimmy did a great job of was keeping the brand simple, right? I mean, I've watched and grown lots and lots of brands in this country, and there's always this propensity for them to start growing, and then while they're growing, they're also growing a menu. They're also trying to grow their food offering, and I watch their teams get schizophrenic a little bit, right? They're trying to grow new teams and grow new brand. Trying to grow, and at the same time they're trying to grow their menu type. And Jimmy did not do that. He kept it really straightforward and really simple. And I think that's a big part of of their success.
Well, I think I'm a walking case study in that. I took over my first restaurant at 21. It was a failing Jimmy John's franchise out of the DC suburbs. And, I walked in with no experience running a restaurant. And because they had such a simple systems and procedures, simple, straightforward menu where all your job was to just execute on it, that was how I was able to be successful. And if you can take a 21-year-old kid that wants to put in the long hours and make him successful, like that's the key to being a great brand.
I was part of a team that was trying to buy Jimmy John's when they had 25 stores. And I sat in a restaurant for a whole day. And one of the things that really impressed me was there was a very defined thing to do at every moment.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like the line when the line was busy, here's what each team member did. As soon as it stopped, here's exactly what you did.
Well,
Right?
and especially in those days, I mean, one of the things that I think Jimmy was really good at is he was great at identifying people that had that chip on their shoulder, that were hungry, over promoting them and setting them free. And like, you said you were talking with them, they had 25 stores. Like those guys were grinding it out. Like you didn't have some lazy manager that was kicking it back in the back office. Like people are out there hustling. And I think that kind of the people behind the brand, that made a huge difference in setting the culture and ultimately the success.
The guy that I was with at the time, he was my partner, Kevin Flynn. He was this amazing man. He had just come off a Blockbuster Video, and they were friends. Jimmy and them became friends, and through that process of looking at it, he really could see that Jimmy had something special, and that systematic approach to delivering a consistent product on an ongoing basis. It was great. It lived up to its name and its promise, and it's continued to. Look, I still feel today that there was no deviation in quality of service from those original stores. I mean, you still walk into a Jimmy John's, it's still as clean, it's still as fresh, it's still as fast, right? They didn't complicate it with all of this other stuff. At the time, I just finished up with Boston Market, and that was a brand who I watched complicate the bejesus out of it. They were early on. They were doing that. When I first met with Boston Market, it was literally a home meal replacement, right? Just for dinner. And that was great. The first stores in Boston were great. And you get a couple of key items, and it was just executed well. And then from there, they start into, well, now we can do lunch, right? And now we could do holiday hams and holiday turkeys, right? And it kept, as it was growing the number of stores, right? You're out there trying to find, 200, 300, 400 stores of people to go run them. And at the same time, you're trying to grow the menu at the execution. And all of that complexity added up for what I believe today was some of its downfall or some of its, frustration.
Yeah, well, I'm friends with the guys over at Boston Market, so I'm not gonna say
Yeah.
anything bad about them. But I think what you're saying, or at least what I'm hearing you say, is it's about being true to your brand. Like Jimmy John's knew that their job was to execute flawlessly and provide convenience. Like, can I go get a dependably good sandwich? I know I'm not going to get stuck in a long line, right? I
Yep.
know it's going to be quick. I know it's going to be accurate. And they really stuck to their identity.
What is your favorite part about your Jimmy John's experience?
Oh man. I mean, so the learning curve of working with people. So, when you get into restaurants, I mean, I think people often misunderstand what the job is. At least my job running, QSR restaurants was to take an 18-year-old kid that probably isn't going to college and be able to train him to run a restaurant, basically be the CEO of his own little $1 million business. I was in the people business. It's people managing people, serving people. And so I think the thing that I learned at a young age in restaurants that was, really fundamental was, how to motivate people, how to lead people, how to, create a sense of purpose. And, you get a short feedback loop, right? Like you say
Yeah.
the wrong thing, they quit, they take their apron off. In the corporate world, you just don't get that. It's,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's right, right. And when what's really fun is it's the purest form of when I empower someone, right, and watch them grow. I think that for me is one of the biggest gifts is watching, really empowering that 18-year-old person to go further than they would have been able to go anywhere else. That's one of those lessons I've brought into all the companies I've grown is that look, when you find great people with the right behavior, right, the right attitude, and you believe in them, you give them hope and belief. There's something about that it's inspiring for them, and it really perpetuates their entire family. I think a lot of times that's what corporate America sucks out of people is make these drones, and maybe that's where the industrial world came from. But Jimmy John's didn't do that. It really empowered them. And look, I used to love going to a Jimmy John's, and I would be ordering a sandwich, and I couldn't get to the end of the counter, and it was done. Right? Nobody else in the industry figured that out. I mean, like just the perfection of, and I knew exactly what I wanted. I walked in there, I knew exactly what I wanted. I could be from the counter at the and out of the store as fast as it took me to fill up my Coke.
well, it goes back to what you were saying about, sense of purpose, right? Your sense of purpose doesn't always need to be to change the world,
Yeah.
right? When
Right.
we were on the line, the game was, can I get the sandwich back to the register, right? And you're like the dream team trying to get it done as quickly as possible. It's a game, right? And when you have a killer rush and you're getting slammed and you can keep up with it, like that feels great. Uh,
Yeah.
and like, going back to the corporate world, man, I felt like, in restaurants, my job was to build skill sets with people. Like I needed to make everyone better so that they could fill that next role. And oftentimes in corporate America, at least in my stints in corporate America, it certainly felt like we're here to extract. We're not here to make you better. I'm here to extract what you have as quickly as possible.
What was the biggest lunch you can remember? Do you remember your biggest rush? The biggest, yeah, do you do a 500 sandwich lunch, 1,000 sandwich lunch?
Well,
Yeah,
look,
you can remember back like some crazy number.
So look, we do dollar sandwich days
Yeah.
and once a year, customer appreciation day. And it's just an onslaught for hours. You're literally baking through the night, but I'm standing here. I've actually got it up on my wall, a framed photo of me and a couple of my managers. And don't tell the health department. Hopefully they don't listen to this, but we went through like, I think it was a homecoming rush and the water went out. So we had no water. We had to go
Whoa.
fill up so the bathrooms are out. You can't sell drinks. We're literally carting in water from, a neighboring, location to pour into the 3 compartment sinks so we can wash dishes and such. But I think we did, as it says up here, we did a $6,600 shift. And this is, prices were much lower, probably half the price of today. So, you're looking at like a $10,000 shift and a, $20,000 day. It was an onslaught. But you
Yeah,
know what? I've got the photo. The three of us are smiling like,
yeah,
we felt
yeah.
like we conquered the world.
Yeah, look, and I think that in itself is a testament to. I don't think people are worried about working hard. Look, I really do believe that. Look, if I have a belief and I want to do something, I want to master it. Working hard is kind of what we do, and you don't even feel it. It's kind of you have pride in fact, that's I think where the blue collar worker today is becoming the white collar worker, because there's something about hitting the pillow at night after working that hard that's got some satisfaction,
Yeah,
right?
and doing a good job. Pride in
Yeah,
your
you
work.
rocked it,
Y-
right?
You send out a great email, you don't feel that great about it, right? Like I put together a great PowerPoint presentation. Did it ultimately like do something in the company? I know when I walk in and I fix somebody's car, or I, do a plumbing job, I do a great job on the tile, right? Like there's pride in that work. There's
Yeah,
pride in crushing a lunch rush.
yeah. I got superintendents that there's a pride in turning a store over flawlessly. There's, when you can tell, it's kind of like the last couple of weeks of school where the teacher and the students are almost tired of each other. Same thing happens on projects, right? You got a group of people that have been together for, call it 120 days, and they've been grinding it out. And there's actually a little bit of exhaustion at the end, and maybe even a little tired frustration. But there's something about coming down that line to the line of scrimmage. Those last, you're down at the goal line and you're exhausted and worn out and sticky and tired. And that feeling of walking around a store with a client, that feeling of satisfaction of turning over a flawless restaurant, right? Doing a great build out. One of my crews just got done doing one for a Panda Express down in Florida. And the walkthrough got some kudos from the client that was just amazing, like some of the best turnover they ever had. That superintendent may have literally been exhausted. She was worked her good, took us off, and the project manager, same thing. The two of them were almost going to kill each other. They're that exhausted at the end of it, but they almost walked 2 feet off the ground after that walkthrough, right? Just that feeling of, yeah, we got there. And all the sins, all the exhaustion, all that stuff, you forget about it. You're like, yeah, that picture you took, you forgot how exhausted you were. I mean, through that rush, the insanity of how fast that went, right? I mean, there was some insanity in that. I know when you do something that big, there's moments of just like, oh my God, I can't, you're going to fall apart sometimes.
Yeah, well, let me say this. I don't think I ever got that wonderful walk-through moment because we always ran into issues with the county right about the time we were opening, and that was always a nightmare. But I do always remember that night before opening day where it's all done and you sit there by yourself in the store and it just feels surreal. It hasn't quite come to life yet, full of potential and opportunity and fear because you have no idea what it's going to open at. Man, that's that moment still sticks with me.
Well, you remember back when you took that $400,000 store that was failing, right? And when you're there, going through that, you know, I think he had something to prove, right? I mean, my sense is that when we take that on, especially as a young person, and you give them the gift of, hey, go rock this, right? I mean, you remember that what it took to grow that. How far did you make that? How far did you get that store to grow?
I took it to 1.2 million over the next 18 months.
That's hey,
I
that's
think
pretty impressive.
I think it's less of a testament to me and more of a testament to how bad the guy before me was doing. But yeah,
That's impressive. Do you guys end up selling the franchise?
yeah, I ended up opening up four more before I ultimately sold.
It's a fun game out there now. So now you get out of the Jimmy John's and you start getting into some tech stuff. And I mean, my guess is that you learned a lot of experience in the systems of Jimmy John's and all the great stuff that they're doing over there. And you take those systems and you start to apply them to restaurants. I know that your group has worked on over 500 restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, we talked about this a little bit before the show, but the great thing about franchises is they give you that playbook. Follow this, execute it day in and day out, and you're going to be successful. That is the reason I was successful is they gave me that playbook and I followed it. But ultimately, the thing that gave me energy, the thing that I loved was always that 5% or 2% that wasn't in the playbook. I loved that creative problem solving around that. And ultimately, as I, got into programming and data analytics, it was like, oh my gosh, so much of what I've just learned is so applicable to restaurants and could make such a big difference. And so I kind of got consumed with this idea of, how could we move from, having a general manager with their finger on the pulse or a feel for the store to, a true data driven decision making process. Here's a good example. Like, 2 hours prior to close, we'd always have to decide, do I need to bake another cycle of bread? And literally we'd stick our head out the door. Is it raining? Like, is there a line at the bar? Was there a lot of leftover bread today? And we'd literally guess. And it was like, there's a data driven way to me guessing is not an efficient process there. And so, that's where we started, and it worked. And, slowly but surely became the company we are.
That's interesting. You talked about how do you start to get that data? What's the matrix? What do you start collecting? How do you start figuring that out?
Yeah, so we look at about 100 million data points every day to make a single decision for a restaurant. Like that, do I bake, another cycle of bread? There's 100 million data points in there. But the data that's not in there is stuff that's manually entered. So restaurants, look, it's a tough job. They're all short on bandwidth. So like, how do we take things off their plate so we don't need them to actually record anything or, put manual feedback in there? Instead, it's how do we take all of the data you already have, your point of sale data, weather data, events, your marketing, limited time offerings, all of that. And, take these machine learning models that have become so impressive, and distill it down into the answer your operator needs.
That's interesting. As AI continues to grow, this large language model gets to grow, right? Can you see that becoming 10x or 10,000x that number in data points?
Yeah, I mean, again, everyone gets obsessed with more data. The truth is, it's not about more data; it's about the right data. So, we have a ton of data points. Most of our job is to filter out the bad ones and focus on the good ones. Like, for example, let's say you had a $2,000 catering order last week. Well, if that's in the data, it's probably going to bias this week's purchasing behavior. Well, you've got to get that out of the data so that you can take only the known orders. And there's 20 or 30 different variables like that if you take the time to understand a brand and understand what data shouldn't be in there, you end up seeing a much, much better result.
Got it. So essentially taking some of the wrong data out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Can you see a future where analytics will be able to help you pick better locations?
Boy, I sure hope so. I always felt like opening up new restaurants was like playing Russian roulette. Like you're just going to spin the dial enough times, and every now and then you get shot in the head. I mean, it's who knows?
I'm with you. Look, like I've done thousands of stores, thousands and thousands, and the ones I think, I mean, there's been times when I thought this one meets all the criteria. It's perfect. It's a great location, and it's a dog. And then I'll have ones that I'm like, no way. There was one I remember in Boca Raton, Florida. I was like, no way. No one's ever going to go that side of the highway. And the broker still calls me up today, like once a year. And it's the most successful shopping center in Boca. And, it's in this great spot. It kind of short stops the highway. It's got a couple of great brands inside of it. It's got a high school near it. And, the broker and I became really good friends. But I remember, he just reminds me, you still picking sites? I'm like, yeah, but you're right. It is a little bit of a Russian roulette. My judgment's always been that AI will come in and be able to look at this in a way that we couldn't, right? Maybe our brains could go, let's call it 100 data points deep. You might get density, population, traffic counts, some urban components or some synergies with hospitals or highways or whatever those data points you might be able to pull in. My guess is that AI will be able to go to 10,000x that and really look at, cell counts and cell phone locations and just be able to look at it with such a deeper level of intuition and bring them all together to create a much clearer vision of a marketplace, and also look at it like, hey, do we need 6 sandwich shops on the same street? right? So looking at it going, maybe it makes sense for you to take that same dollars and move it over to this location where it's got this very similar characteristics, but there's two of them.
Yeah, and there are some companies out there that are doing that right now, and I've heard some good things. In my world, I think there's always a science and an art. We do predictive forecasting, so if you were to say, hey, we've got a football team that's in town, right, that affects my behavior. Well, we can take that into account because we can see how those football games have affected your traffic over the last, 5, 10 years, right? But if the president's coming to speak and it's the first time, there's no data for that, right? There's an art there. And, while I think that, AI and machine learning are going to get better at the art and guessing there, I still think it's a little bit of an art. And I think the same kind of goes for, real estate brokers, right? Or, you're in the construction industry. I'm sure that when you look a guy in the eyes and say this general contractor knows what they're talking about, like I feel good about them, I'm sure there's something quantifiable there, but that's going to be harder for AI to pick up on.
Well, I think the future is we need to take all this mystery out. One of the biggest problems in the construction world is that you can't trust anybody, right? First of all, the clients, you got a client. That's everything that's great about the business for the client is really crappy for the general contractor, right? I mean, you have a client that can bid to 5 different people, or 7 different people for a project, and you're like, okay, let's imagine, hey, we're building a Jimmy John's. Let's call it 50 line items, right? Tile, electrician, plumbing, HVAC, painting, right? For us, we're always trying to get 3 bids per line item. Let's say that each of those subs spends $1,000 bidding a project, right? For us, that's $150,000 in people spending time and money out of the industry before a project even gets awarded. I do that times 5 contractors. That's $750,000 in the industry, and no one's been awarded a project yet, right? So, there's a lot of effort goes into what I believe becomes, very nonsensical differences in pricing. If we really were able to say, look, what's the right way of doing this, right?
Okay, so I got to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So I always had this debate. Do you go
Yeah.
with the local general contractor or do you go with the guys that build out a ton of Jimmy Johns? Because, the local guy knows the right subs and, he doesn't have to bid it out to everybody. You get the national guy, he doesn't have that on the ground knowledge, but, has much more brand knowledge. How do you weigh those two things?
It's a really difficult conversation because franchisees oftentimes will be short-sighted. Like, hey, look, I got my Uncle Bob. He's here. He's local. Hey, by the way, he bid it and it was $35,000 cheaper. But I've got this ABC company. He's built 60 of them, right? He's continuously performed at, been able to turn them all over in, call it 7 or 8 weeks. And, do I have Uncle Bob at $35,000 less, or do I bring in contractor A that's $35,000 more? And ultimately, do I lose it if Uncle Bob misses my turnover date by a month? Am I losing it in money I could have been generating, or rent I'm paying, or the cost of not being efficient in the turnover? So yeah, there's a lot of variables. To me, it's always about finding a team that can prove to you a reproducible experience, right? Finding people that have a clear, you're clear that they can turn this over because look, what's it cost you if you go to do pre-store opening marketing? You're hiring now, you miss it by a week, or they miss their final inspection, right? Guys who can't get you over the goal line in a committed amount of time. What does that cost your pre-opening experience, right? Your pre-opening training. Now you've hired these kids that are 18 years old, and you're like, we're not ready to start. We're supposed to start Monday, and then you get to like midweek this week. Yeah, we're not gonna be able to open to the following Monday, and you're trying to keep that employee around, and he just lost another week's of pay, right?
Yeah, well, not to mention these franchisors tend to be very nitpicky with their build outs. So I remember having the conversations when I went the local route. The local contractor's like, no, like, Jimmy John's wants it this way, and he would, you can't do it. It was always the friction between the contractor and the franchisor. Whereas the national guy's like, hey, before we even get this, they're going to want it this way, so we're going to do it this way.
Yeah, there's some value in that, right? Some value in having the experienced one there. Look, I think it goes all kinds of ways. Also, look, if a guy's going to build 10 stores, maybe he suffers through the first one with someone he knows locally, and maybe it's not as efficient, but long term, he's got a long term relationship in a local market. There's all kinds of characteristics of that, but for me, it's always about finding that great team that can prove they've done this reproducibly and have a predictable deliverable, because that predictable deliverable really does set. We just turned a store over. I was talking about that store that we just did down in Fort Lauderdale, and we turned it over, and we were the first contractor in a while for that brand to turn over on time. So what happened was the operators kind of sandbagged their hiring, right? They didn't trust that the contractor was going to turn over time, because their experience on other projects that weren't us were that they're not going to turn over on time. And then what ended up happening was they don't hire like they should have. And now they've got a store that turns over, and now they're 3 or 4 weeks of holding that store, and they should have been open a week later. Now they've lost 2 or 3 weeks of store opening revenue, because they weren't on top of the hiring when they should have been, because they just didn't trust that contractors would turn over on time. What does that cost a brand, right? What does that cost your training team, right? Because you're flying people in for training. You got this small little window for them to come in, right? There's a bunch of cost when we don't have something we can count on.
Look, I mean, a lot of times it's almost going out of business or not. I remember my second store. So like I said, I started out at 21 in the industry. I turned my first store around. I saved up enough capital to open up a second store. I'm like 23. I take out all of my savings again, and bet it all on black to open up this second store. And sure enough, the permit guys took like 6 months to go through permitting. So we're already behind, and we're already going to start paying on our lease, which, is money I don't have. And we get down to the final walkthrough from the inspector, and he goes, yeah, we got a problem. This bathroom's not ADA compliant. I think we had a floating sink, and we missed it by an inch or something like that. And they're like, we're going to, I think their proposal was, we're going to move your entire wall back, which was all of the bathrooms into the kitchen. Again, I have no money. And we go back and forth with these guys. Finally, they come out for the final inspection again. They're like, no, you're not opening. And I remember going to the general contractor. I'm like, I'm going to go under. I mean, the county is going to put this 23-year-old under because they made a mistake and proved the permits and then changed their mind, which they have the right to do. And so I said, look, I'm going into the permit office, and I'm either going to get thrown in jail or they're going to get this approved. And I'm like, again, this is how a 21-year-old.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, like, you're desperate. You're literally, you know, that feeling of, I'm about to lose everything. That feeling of that desperation will make you do some crazy things.
And that's what's on the line, right? That's what the delays end up being. And, sure enough, I did get escorted out, kicking and screaming by security. And yeah, literally the director came out and said, what the heck is going on here? And, I pleaded my case and let him know, all right, we've got you. We'll take care of it. He'll be in tomorrow. And, it was that close. I mean, it was that close to, I can't pay my bills or, get the store open.
Now, look, all that has some real impacts, and having it, having have an architect. Number one, make sure that the drawings are drawn right. Having I've had McDonald's projects where they were off by the thickness of the grout. Right, someone took a measurement from the plans on one page were from inside from drywall out. The other ones were from studs out, and like maybe it was a grout line or a sheet of drywall, and all of a sudden you're off on a bathroom and you don't meet ADA compliance, and just the impact of that right at the line of scrimmage, right? Because the stress, you're already under stress. I mean, as an operator, you're already under dramatic stress because now is your opening day. Now your party happens. A contractor had their time. Now you have your time. I mean, that stress is palpable, right?
Yeah, well, and you only find out whether the contractor was a good contractor afterwards. I remember tile, like we used to have, the first guy that did my tile didn't back it very well. So they all started cracking. And then the next store we went to open, I was there with a golf ball, just dropping it on every tile. Like, we're the ones that are hollow. Like, we're going to fix those because I don't want to spend the next 3 years of my life coming in every Saturday to fix tile.
Yeah, no, that's you learn, right? You get to be a real pro on that construction side.
Yeah, the weird skills you won't learn in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, no, it's great. So you get into Cogs and you really start to build on this brand. And so how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an iterative process. So I think it originally started with doing pricing optimization. Another thing we struggled with was, labor costs went up. I guess we need to raise prices. I think let's raise it a quarter. I think 525 sounds good. We just kind of take a guess. So the idea was, how can we take all of this, historic data and figure out what the right price is for chips and what the right price is for drinks. And somewhere along the way, me and my co-founder talked to dozens and dozens of restaurants, and we ultimately found out that the real pain point they had was they just didn't know who was going to walk in the door on a given day. And if you don't know who's going to walk in the door, they were making inefficient decisions on what they ordered, for inventory, what they prepped each day, and who they staffed. And the real takeaway was, I don't need analytics, I don't need dashboards, I just need an answer. Can you tell me what to prep? Can you tell me what to order? Don't give me a report, just give me the number I need. And, we kind of adopted that ethos and mentality. I called up my cousin who's got a couple restaurants. We put it in place. We cut his bread waste by 53% and said, wow, this works. And,
53%. That's a pretty good number.
it was a big number. It was bigger than we expected. And I mean, statistically, we saw that it was possible to get it down by 85%. But statistics and the reality of running a restaurant are two very different things. But we were really happy with it, and I think that was what caused us to basically put life on hold and make this our full-time thing.
That's awesome. You've grown pretty fast. Kind of go back a little bit about your growth, how many companies you're working with. You guys have grown pretty fast as an organization. How's that been?
It's difficult. At some points you feel like you need to grow faster. At other times you feel like, how do you hang on? But I think when you grow up in a world where you're, having to manage the homecoming rush with no water and, lines out the door, everything seems a little bit numb after that. So it's still the same philosophy as a restaurant. Find great people, empower them, get the right people on the boat, pointed in the right direction, and good things happen.
Yeah, the restaurant tech has been a big thing. I mean, I think the same thing happens when I have a playbook, when I can keep my folks' heads down and really focusing on a game plan, and I don't have them trying to imagine what store prep should be, how to set up for staffing, if I can have them follow a game plan, and the more they follow that game plan, the more profitable we get. I think ultimately every restaurant owner, every restaurant brand is looking to really create that paradigm.
Yeah, and it's more than just profitability. I mean, profitability is part of it, right? I mean, again, coming from the construction side of things, when everything goes wrong, it's kind of a nightmare. It's, how do you get more things to go right? And so it's that whole idea of being proactive and not reactive, because when you're reactive, it's you're always waiting to see what happens. It's a stressful environment. That whole cool, calm, collective. We have the plan. It's going to plan. This new thing happened. Here's the now what you do. Right. That's just a better way to run a restaurant, run a construction site. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, no, having a plan, look, and the plan doesn't get behind at the line of scrimmage. It doesn't get by. I tell people all the time, it got behind before we started the day, right? Not having the plan from yesterday, not walking in today, already knowing what we're doing. I didn't run out of bread today. I ran out of bread yesterday when I wasn't planning for it. I ran out of yesterday when I wasn't set for prep properly today, right? All that stress that I added to today because I didn't have this game plan yesterday.
Yeah, and look, AI, it's not going to do your tiling for you, right? It's not going to solve the plumbing issue. It's not going to, maybe it'll do the architecture, but it's not going to make the sandwiches or create those magical experiences for guests. But it's really good at the cold analytics, the optimization, the logistics, and how can we let the machines do the more computational things and let the people do the more people centric things, the things that we actually want to do.
Well, Matt Wampler, as you continue to grow, Clear Cogs, I think that there's an amazing, creation in the analytical part of this, really having a smarter way for managers and owners to manage their brands. As folks want to bring you in and help them, who's a perfect customer for you? What do they look like? What's the best way for them to get to understand, how do I become a customer of yours?
Yeah, look, we love the fast casual QSR brands. Building out a true AI operations system for a brand, you typically need to be a little bit larger. So think 15, 20 units or above. Somewhere between 15, 20 to 1,000 is kind of our sweet spot. I would say that one of the things that we are working on doing is how do we not just provide these AI tools to the largest, most successful brands, but how do we also empower the independent operator, democratize AI? And so we just launched on the Toast Marketplace with, a freemium offering. It's not quite the same, but, how do we give some useful tips and tricks that, intelligence layer on top of your data? You might have stocked out of this item. This is how much revenue you lost out on. Menu item forecasting, sales forecasting, that kind of thing. Again, not a full decision management platform, but something to help everybody. And yeah, if you get on our website, you can book a call right there. We love talking with all operators. You name it.
All right, give me the website.
Clearcogs.com.
All right, I'm going to make sure that that's all down below. Contact information for you.
Yeah, you can always email me at info@clearcogs.com. Or again, the best way to do it is to just book right on the website or reach out to me on social media.
Well, Matt, I got to tell you, it's a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, in our pre-show and where you're going. I love looking at intelligent restaurants. That alma mater of yours, Jimmy John's, was a great learning. There's a lot of great restaurateurs out there that learned from that alma mater. That was, it brought people through a great system, and I'm really, proud to have watched you do it, and what Jimmy did with his brand just was quite amazing. In growing that to the success. It's all, I think, all systems, showing that great systems really make for an amazing restaurant.
Yeah, take care of your franchisees, and your franchisees will take care of your brand.
Yeah, neat stuff. Matt, grateful to have you on the show.
Anthony, thank you.
Audience members, hey, if you guys could take a second and like and subscribe. It's been amazing this last month. All of you listeners, we've had amazing numbers, and it's been great. I just noticed a bunch of you guys were not subscribers yet. If you could go out and take a second and like and subscribe, it means the world to Alyssa and Joe and all the guys and the girls in the background that make this podcast happen and bring amazing guests like Matt Wampler on and understanding Clear Cogs and what they're doing. So if you could like and subscribe and do that now, I'd be extremely grateful. And as always, thanks for listening.